Welcome to the International Women's Day Conference. Please give this conference a round of applause.
Firstly, I think it's great that everybody woke up to actually be here, and that's not easy. So, I think we appreciate that. And I think it's really hard, actually, to pull something like this off. It takes a lot of effort. So, Dr. Neva, you deserve a lot of praise for doing something like this. That wasn't part of my speech, so I'll actually begin it. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here and to have the opportunity to share with you my thoughts on not only what it means to be a woman, but what it means to be an empowered woman. And as our MC said, nowadays we have women in finance, women in the arts, and so forth. We have different causes like women's fight for equal pay, which, by the way, according to The Economist, an article in The Economist that I read recently, out of 30 countries that they had chosen in the Western world for equal pay, the US was 19, which is pretty bad, don't we think? And the UK, my people, we were 22, so we didn't fare much better. And all of us were outstripped by Europe. We also have the fight against women's sexual discrimination, which is exhausting. And whenever you think that things are about to change, something happens in the news to show you that nothing's changed at all. Then you have the fight of being a woman of color, which combines all the other fights plus racial discrimination. And frankly, once you say it out loud, like I have, it is easy to feel like you're sinking into a perpetual cycle of doom and gloom, especially made for us women. But we all know this isn't the full story. Today we have far more than we have ever had, and I can't imagine a world where women could not vote, a world where women were treated like cattle by a man, a world where women were uneducated on purpose, a world where women were killed as children for purely being born a girl. Actually, all of that still happens. So where does that leave us, and how do we feel about it? We are fighting, we are pushing, and we are trying to change this picture, but what work are we actually doing on our own selves? As we get up and we go into the world holding a sword and a shield in our hand, ready to tackle every onslaught that comes our way, what are we doing to sharpen our own minds? What are we doing to shield our heart? How are we progressing? So now I'm not talking about the causes and the injustices of the material world, because you are going to hear that from a lot of women. But I'm actually talking today about the soul. And if you don't believe in a soul, call it consciousness, or the intellect, or the inner spirit. How are we feeding that part of us? And I'm a Hindu, Indian, and in our religion, we believe that your mind is your battlefield. It is your arena of experience. And it is there in this mind that you can use your will either to succeed or to fail. It is there in your mind where you define your value, your sense of worth, your vision of yourself. It is in this mind that you perceive and observe, and there you digest and create a version of reality based on these perceptions. And this gives your world meaning. That is a lot of power that we give a mind. Our mind is a painter of every painting imprinted on ourselves. And yet we rarely ever pay attention. Just think about it. When do you pay your mind attention? You just think. Whatever it wants to think. You never say no or yes or I'm going to change this outlook. Sometimes you do, but it takes a long time. We give our minds all the power, and then we feel weak and let down. And that is the very antithesis of who we are, not just as women, but as humans. And since there are men here, this speech is for you as well. So, to take it back a little, I was born in London, clearly, to two very entrepreneurial and ambitious Indian parents. I was born in St. Mary's Hospital, in the same ward as all the princes of the royal family. Though at my birth, there wasn't press or millions of people waiting, there are around 20 or 30 relatives dressed in saris in the ward. And being the first baby and the only baby of my parents, I have got away with a lot. But I have the never-ending guilt that I have never achieved as much as I could have. And if you couple this with a society that congratulates you more for getting married and having children than it does expressing yourself artistically, well then I have failed most miserably. And you can see my failures in the bio printed. I went to a wonderful school for young women in the heart of London. There from a young age, we were taught to be exemplary. We were also taught we could be anything and do anything our hearts desired. Now, I'm older obviously now, but your school years don't seem like a big deal when you're trying to pay a mortgage or get a promotion, but they are. I was lucky enough that I never felt less than a man, and I still don't. I also never felt any racial prejudice growing up. In fact, I never even realized that someone would describe me as a woman of color until I moved to the United States 3 years ago. And it's not that I thought I was the same skin color as everyone else. It just never occurred to me why it could ever possibly matter. That is how protected my environment was. And this confidence and ability to feel accepted without question, to be supported and nurtured and pushed, is what led me to take every risk I ever took after I left school. And that is why it is key to understand, especially if you do have children now, that they are impressionable, that age is impressionable. Your mind is still learning and figuring out who it is in relation to everything else in the world. And that mind should be infused with positivity and stability, so that when rocky waters come, and we all know as human beings, they will come, our minds will sway slowly, but it will never crash. By the time I was 22, I had graduated in economics and philosophy, which was dominated by male students, though I don't think they know philosophy very well. I also worked on a male-dominated trading floor, and I had signed a record deal with Sony Music in India. It was a lot at 22. And I think it was possible because at that age, I sincerely thought I was invincible. Nothing was impossible for me. Why should it be? I had never tasted rejection, and therefore to me, it did not exist. When I embarked on a musical career and I released now 2 albums, it came with a lot of unexpected demands. I was asked to lose more weight, to stop eating pizza, something I did not take very kindly to take medication for my hair and my skin, probably something else that I just can't remember. I was told that my cheeks were too fat for the camera for a music video. Yeah, can you believe this? And I can see like someone checking out my cheeks here, but 8 years on, yeah, it's a different face. But that's what I was told every day when I was a musician. And what I chose to do was see the funny side of it, because there really wasn't any other choice apart from self-doubt or anger. 2 qualities I had no desire to pick up, especially when driven by other people and their opinions. It wasn't easy, and I don't want to give the impression that being picked on for any physical attribute you may have is acceptable. It's not. But it's also the way the industry worked in the arts. And, they weren't trying to be mean. They were trying to secure success for a woman in the arts, and that meant sounding and dressing a certain way. Men in the industry, I don't think anyone would dare tell them to comb their hair, let alone dissect their body or their clothing. But it happens every day. And not just in the arts, but across the whole spectrum. However, it is particularly bad in the arts because all your success and validation is derived from the public. That is not only dangerous, but it can destroy your sense of self. And as a woman, how do you deal with it? I don't know the perfect solution, but I feel you separate yourself from the criticism and suggestions. You logically ask yourself whether they are valid or not. And sometimes they might be. Sometimes we as humans need to hear harsh critiques and better ourselves. But sometimes we just need to laugh. recognize a ridiculous situation, and move on. And as women, we don't move on very easily. We either try and fight the battle, or we internalize the rubbish that is thrown towards us and make it part of us. And I'm not saying you don't fight injustices or prejudice. I do. I've fought them with every big decision I've made in my life. But you pick your battles, because time is precious. And this world has no problem wasting our time, but we should not waste it. You know, our time and our mind are our two most valuable assets, and we throw them away on a daily basis on something or someone that makes us feel less. Right? No? No one agrees with me? And to take a step back, what does it mean to internalize something? It means you create a layer within yourself unconsciously. If you imagine yourself as a young girl, and no matter what age you are in this room, I don't know, but imagine yourself as a young girl, let's say 5 years old, okay? And every time you hear something that tells you the way you should be in your life, the way you ought to be, you wrap another layer around you. Think of your age now and think of everything you have heard of the way you should be leading your life. And imagine that's a layer of clothing wrapped around this 5-year-old girl. And these could be impressions like, a prince has to save a princess, or you have to have a child, or you have to be a certain weight, or you have to go to a certain school, get a certain career, reach a certain goalpost. Your colleagues or your friends or your family have told you to lead a certain way of life because that's going to secure happiness for you. Therefore, you have to do that. Otherwise, your life will be miserable and you won't be happy. Can you even see yourself? How many layers of clothing do you have around this 5-year-old child? Where is this girl? We are so buried in layers and layers of conditioning. We are drenched, and this is both men and women, we are drenched from other people's words and opinions. Where are you in all of this? Remove the layers. We want to be powerful women. We want to change the world. We cannot do this when we are shackled by the impressions, judgments, and conditioning of this world. Remove the layers. Now you may be thinking, well, that's all great, but how do I then achieve my goals or become something if I'm removing all the layers that got me to where I am today? Having dreams or goals is different to being conditioned and feeling like you ought to be or have something. Dream big, but do it for yourself and your vision of your life, not for anyone else's. And this may seem obvious, but women have had millions and millions of years of conditioning to be subservient, and that is hard to undo. Having goals for your own life is what we call in my religion, it's called your dharma or your dharma, or Americans say dharma, but that might make you understand. And what it means to do your duty, to live your life in the best way possible for you. And it's to use your higher self and use your creative will to manifest that which you want for yourself and those you love. Otherwise, there really is no point in living. And there are many things. There are many things that throw us off-piste and make us feel less. And we have to eliminate those things. For example, a widow in India may not be invited to a wedding because she's considered unlucky. I would think in that situation it was the husband who died who was unlucky, not the woman. But no, we're taught the opposite. We are taught that mainly in our culture, that when a man is divorced, he is shown support. He is shown plenty of new options, whereas a woman is kind of ignored and perceived as a failure. Today, a man is high-fived for his many sexual conquests, whereas a woman is negatively labeled. And these things are changing, but not fast enough. And one of the most poisonous reasons it is not changing is because women still believe these convoluted ideas and treat other women the same. Mother-in-laws, especially in the East, and now I've seen it in the West as well, they treat their sons like gods and their daughter-in-laws badly. Why? Because they were treated like that before, and therefore it is the way that it is. I mean, if you think about it logically, spiritually, intellectually, it is absolutely ridiculous. But we as women conform and do not change ourselves for the woman next to us. So I have a friend. She's beautiful, intelligent, ambitious. She's a doctor in New York, and she owns a few practices and would like to continue to grow. You know the response that she gets from men? That sounds like too much for you to handle. Or another great response, oh, you have all of that? You must be in a lot of debt. She has been asked to quit medicine by men. She has been told not to buy her own apartment because it puts men off. She has been told repeatedly to be less so that a man can feel like he is more. And it is not just men who tell her this, it is women also. Why would you ever tell another woman to lower herself for someone else? You would never, ever tell a man that. And it reminds me of this great lyric from my favorite album by my favorite artist called Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. And it's a great album. Just go back to it, it's just a great album. But anyway, so she has this line and she says, and it's short, but all she says is, why for you to increase must I decrease? And she hit it spot on. I will not decrease. If you want to increase, you come and match me, but I will not decrease. And I am not blaming men. There are like 5 of you who are here, I'm not blaming you. I'm not blaming men. They are also conditioned. They have a default pattern. Maybe they have a little voice in their head that says, must be caveman, bring wood home, feed wife, be strong. But that's not our problem. Our problem is in the way that we treat one another. When I was younger, I did not understand the concept of jealousy or insecurity, or that I could bring those traits out of someone else. My mother once told me, and I'm sure mothers in here have said the same thing to their daughters. My mother once told me, be careful what you tell women, because they can be very jealous and insecure. Right? I see all the moms who are like, said that line. I thought it was ridiculous. Then later, at the age of 26 or so, when something untoward happened to me in my personal life, a female acquaintance said to me, well, other women will be happy because finally something bad happened to you. Everything seemed perfect. That is when I realized this is how women treat one another. How little respect, genuine love, and support we hold in our hearts. And this isn't our fault. If you read any novel from 100 years ago, women are squabbling over the best groom so they don't live in abject poverty. They are preening and sprucing themselves constantly in every novel that I've read growing up in England. But this must stop. You know, we idolize women from a distance. The Beyoncés, the Michelle Obamas of the world. But in our day-to-day, we fail to identify with the woman right next to us. We fail, not just as women, but as humans, to lower our egos and to see ourselves reflected in the other. We are so wrapped up, we are so layered, we're just never naked enough to see our similarities and problems that we all may share. We reinforce our insecurities to one another, and then we punish each other. Men don't control things because they are better than us. They control things because they have a brotherly camaraderie. And this brotherly camaraderie comes naturally to them, and it's part of their inner culture. Okay, it's you gentlemen who was like, I don't think I agree with that.
Well, women seem to group together easier than men.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think now, but on a simple level, I was going to use a different phrase, but on a simple Yeah, on a simple level, you see a man and a man working together, and yes, egos get involved, but there is a certain respect and acceptance for the man next to you, right? You see that in war as well. You see that in a lot of examples. Whereas women have never traditionally done that. It's never been in our mindset. Whereas women are now cultivating that. You know, we do it on the grand scale. We do the marches, the discussions, the movements, the social media, we're all one. We do that. But the habit needs to start a lot closer to home. The habit to say, to do, to react, to define lives in our mind. And the movement starts there. It starts with how you treat your sister, your friend, the random woman sitting on the tube next to you. Well, you don't have tube, subway, but yeah. You know, I was going to ask the question that how many people here felt that life just gets tougher, because I feel that. You know, I feel that we start off with this clean slate, and then by the time we pass through the education phase and we're well into work and an adult personal life, we have so much on our plate. And things just keep happening. And I feel this must be for everyone sitting here. Things just keep happening, both good and bad. And you think you have control, but you don't have control, and your life is constantly flashing across your eyes. And I see this guilt and this desperation in myself and fellow women to succeed. Girls who think that a man will make them happy, or women who think if they reach a certain level in their career, then they will be happy. You know, women who think that if they don't match their biological clocks, then, you know, they're going to miss the boat and they're going to be unhappy. And this is not just women, this is men and women, we all look for happiness in everything outside of ourselves. Everything. Think about it. Everything. I'm going to get this, I'm going to be happy. I'm going to buy that, I'm going to be happy. If I get the bigger house, I'm going to be happy. If I make MD, I'm going to be happy. You know what? When I have children and they reach a certain age, I'm going to be happy. Does the happiness ever come? It doesn't come, because happiness is your constant nature. It's your way of being. It is controlled here. But we don't try and control this. We try and control all the variables outside of us, which we cannot. You know, over here in the West, I find that we have an obsession with perfection, a desire to have everything completed and be a complete version of ourselves. How many times have you asked a man what he's thinking, and he's responded, nothing? This isn't actually a bad thing. Not thinking, not obsessing, not dissecting the past or creating anxiety in the future means you are present. Not thinking doesn't mean that you're incapable or unintelligent. It means you're quieting, you're silencing your brain, your mind. That's what you're doing. Because remember, your mind is like a pendulum. One day, you're thinking about something that happened last week that hurt you. Next day, you're worrying about something that's going to happen in a year's time that you can't control. This is your mind. It sways from past to future. And it's very rarely in the present. So women empowerment, to me, means empowering my mind, controlling my senses, my reactions, my ego, my anxiety, and allowing myself to breathe. It means embracing the woman right next to me and identifying with them, supporting them, understanding that they are not in competition with me, but that they are my reflection, they are my sister. Celebrating womanhood means celebrating myself and loving myself. And this brings me to my very last observation. If you weren't sick of this British voice already, the last few years haven't been easy for me. Musically, I peaked very early. And at that age, I did not know what to do with my success or how to monetize it for a lifetime. I didn't know how to build a brand or how to take advantage of a gift offered to me, or nor did I really know how to make any long-term decisions. Since then, I've been on an artistic roller coaster, and I've had both blessings and undeniable troubles. But the greatest story I have ever taken with me is of a goddess in India. So this goddess is one of the oldest Vedic Hindu goddesses. And by the way, just to clarify, Hindus only believe in one god. We just have lots of manifestations. Just to clarify. I feel like I have to do that, you know? So this goddess, you can define her as the female representation of universal consciousness. Her name is Aklandeshwari Ma in Sanskrit, which means the goddess who is never not broken. Now, when I was in India, my father, it was over Thanksgiving last year, my father took me to this 10,000-year-old temple. And there, they worshipped this goddess who stands on top of, well, the way she's depicted is she stands on top of a crocodile on a river. And she is beautiful. She's fierce, gentle, strong, and smiling. And I was completely intrigued by her, especially as she identified with being broken and incomplete, rather than the perfect picture we are used to. How can a goddess be broken? How can a manifestation of divinity be incomplete? Well, what she means, and the point of her, is that as a woman, you have to embrace that you are broken and can be broken into many, many parts. You have to embrace that you are imperfect and fragile, because only if you can be broken into many, many parts can you put yourself back together in any way that you want. If you are born fixed and solid, you cannot change. You cannot mold. You cannot grow. But if you have the ability to be broken into pieces like a puzzle, it means that you have the power or the creative will, if you call it, to reshape yourself and mend yourself in any way that you want. It gives you the freedom and it gives you the power back to you. And we are not just women celebrating International Women's Day. We are warriors of our mind, and we are goddesses of this modern age. Thank you.